My wife is the CEO of a publicly listed company, and I am just a small employee in her company. The morning sunlight pours into the bedroom through the gap in the curtains, and I get up quietly, careful not to wake my wife, who is still asleep. Su Qing, the CEO of Jinhua Group, the youngest and most accomplished female entrepreneur in this city. And I, Chen Mo, am just an ordinary employee in the marketing department of her company. 7 years ago, an accident changed the course of our lives. Who would have thought that an ordinary marketing specialist would marry the CEO of a conglomerate? What's even more ironic is that this marriage is still a secret, and no one in the company knows about our relationship. I tie my tie and look at myself in the mirror. At 30, there are already fine lines at the corners of my eyes. Compared to Su Qing, who has an innate aura of an elite, I seem so ordinary. Her father is a financial magnate, and her mother is a renowned lawyer, while my parents are retired teachers from a small county. Remember to dress more formally for the board meeting today. Su Qing had woken up at some point and was leaning against the headboard watching me. She always speaks like this, even when she's being caring. It's laced with an authoritative tone. Got it, so, Su. I respond deliberately in a businesslike tone, earning a displeased frown from her. When we leave, we move in sync, one ahead of the other as we exit the apartment. She takes the exclusive elevator to the underground garage, while I squeeze into the employee elevator to the first floor lobby. This life has been going on for 7 years, like two parallel train tracks that never intersect. In the company lobby, my colleagues are gossiping. I heard CEO Su is announcing the acquisition deal today. That ice-cold beauty would dare to marry her. She'll quiet down. I lower my head and quickly walk by, my heart aching like it's being pricked by needles. No one knows that the ice-cold beauty. They speak of rest her head on my arm every night. But recently, even this habit has gradually faded. In the elevator, I run into Su Qing's assistant, Lin Wan. This young, handsome man is always polite, but looks at me with a disdainful expression when he sees me. Team leader Chun, good morning. He deliberately raises his voice. I heard your department's performance was at the bottom last quarter. I don't say anything, just nod. These petty challenges have long become routine. Su Qing never inquires about my situation at the company. Perhaps to her, it's simply not worth mentioning. In the meeting room, Su Qing is presenting the quarterly report. She's wearing a sharp black suit, exuding elite charm with every gesture. I sit in the back row, looking at this woman who is legally my wife, but in reality is distant and out of reach. Next, the marketing department will present the new product promotion plan. She scans the room, her gaze briefly lingering on me for less than a second. I stand up, feeling my palms sweat. I've stayed up for 3 nights working on this plan, yet at this moment, I feel no confidence. During the presentation, I notice Su Qing frown twice while checking her watch, and Lin Wan has been whispering with someone beside him. The ideas are outdated. The data support is insufficient. Su Qing's comment is brief and sharp. Redo it. After the meeting, I hide in the stairwell to smoke. My phone vibrates. It's a message from Su Qing. There's a social event tonight. I won't be home for dinner. I stare at the screen for a long time, then reply with a simple okay. 7 years of marriage, and our conversations have become increasingly brief, like 2 roommates sharing an apartment, rather than a married couple. When I finish work, it starts raining heavily. I hesitate at the company entrance, wondering whether I should take a taxi, but then I see Su Qing's Bentley slowly driving out of the garage. Through the window, I see her talking to Lin Wan, and they're standing quite close. The rain soaks my shirt, but I don't feel cold. This marriage was a mistake from the start, and I should have realized it earlier. How could a CEO of a listed company ever truly fall in love with an ordinary employee? I turn and walk into the rain, deciding that tonight I will have a serious talk with Su Qing. 7 years have passed, and this absurd marriage should come to an end. I remember that night from 7 years ago very clearly. I had just joined Jinhua Group 3 months earlier and was still a naive rookie. The marketing manager had called me in to attend an industry cocktail party as a stand-in. The banquet hall of the Imperial Hotel was resplendent with gold and jewels, and I was awkward in the rented suit I was wearing. In the corner, I noticed a woman in a dark green evening gown, standing alone. She looked like a solitary bamboo stalk, out of place amidst the clinking glasses and chatter. That was Su Qing, the heiress of Jinhua Group, who had just returned from studying abroad to take over the family business. Xiao Chun, go deliver a glass of champagne to CEO Su. The manager gave me a push. Be sharp, don't mess this up. I walked over, nervously sweating in my palms. When Su Qing took the glass, our fingers brushed for a brief moment, and she quickly pulled her hand back, frowning slightly. New here? She asked in a cool voice. Cheng Yu from the marketing department, 3 months on the job. I answered honestly. She nodded and didn't say anything more. Just then, a waiter walked over and whispered something in her ear. I saw her expression change slightly before she followed the waiter toward a side room. My intuition told me something was wrong. The waiter's eyes were darting around, and I noticed his name tag was crooked, as if he had just put it on. I set the glass down and quietly followed them. At the end of the hallway in the side room, Su Qing was surrounded by 3 men. One of them was Zhao Shikai, the young heir of a rival company, Han Yuan Group, and the other 2 appear to be bodyguards. Miss Su, drink this and we'll be friends, Zhao Shikai smiled maliciously. Otherwise, tomorrow's headlines will be pictures of the Jinhua heiress drunk and making a scene. Su Jin's face turned pale, but she straightened her back. Zhao Shikai, you know the consequences of this. Consequences? Zhao Shikai laughed loudly. After we've had our way with her, old Su will be eager to take me as his son-in-law. In a rush of blood, I charged forward. CEO Su, the chairman is looking for you, I shouted loudly, positioning myself in front of her. Zhao Shikai's expression darkened. Who's this little lackey? Get out. One of the bodyguards tried to push me, but I grabbed his wrist and threw him over my shoulder. My judo from college came in handy. Another bodyguard lunged at me, and I sidestepped, but Zhao Shikai kicked me from behind, sending me crashing into the wall. Call the police. I yelled at Su Qing. In the chaos, Su Qing stepped on Zhao Shikai's foot in high heels, and as he winced in pain, she grabbed my hand and ran. We ran all the way to the parking lot, and she trembled as she pressed the car lock. Get in, she commanded. The car drove far from the hotel before she finally stopped at the roadside, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Thank you. After a long silence, she spoke 2 words. It was then that I noticed blood trickling from my forehead, possibly from the scrape when I hit the wall. Su Qing rummaged through her bag and handed me a tissue, her fingertips trembling slightly. I'll take you to the hospital, she said. No need, it's just a small injury. I pressed on the wound, but Zhao Shikai won't let this go. She sneered he wouldn't dare. What happened tonight would only harm him if it got out. The atmosphere in the car grew tense. I secretly observed her and noticed that her eyelashes were long, her nose bridge high, and the lines of her profile were as perfect as if sculpted. Why are you helping me? She suddenly asked. I paused for a moment. Anyone would do the same. Not really, she shook her head. In the workplace, most people would choose to turn a blind eye. When she dropped me off at the building where I rented, it was pouring rain. She hesitated for a moment, then handed me a black umbrella from the back seat. See you Monday, Chun M.O. It was the first time she called my name. I kept that umbrella, its handle engraved with the letters SW, Su Wei, Su Jin's English name. Later, I found out that night she could have called a driver or a bodyguard, but she had them deal with another urgent matter. If I hadn't shown up by chance, the consequences would have been unimaginable. A week later, I was called to the CEO's office. Su Qing sat behind a large desk, sunlight pouring in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden halo around her. I'm transferring you to be my personal assistant, with double the salary. She got straight to the point. I was too stunned to speak. This position was usually filled by returnees or people with connections. Why me? I asked. She put down her pen and stared me in the eye. Because you're not afraid of trouble and you're not greedy. After a pause, she added, and you're tight-lipped. Just like that, I went from being an ordinary employee to the CEO's assistant. I followed her everywhere, gradually learning the dark undercurrents of this glamorous business world. And my relationship with Su Qing quietly changed with every crisis we handled. It wasn't until that rainy night, when she got drunk after a project failure, that everything took a sharp turn. I was taking her home when she suddenly grabbed my collar and said, Chinamo, let's get married. I thought she was just rambling in her drunken state. But the next morning, she showed up at my apartment with 2 copies of an agreement, her eyes clear as day. The prenuptial agreement is ready. Just sign it, she said. I need someone who won't betray me. I should have refused, but for some inexplicable reason, I signed it. Perhaps, from that night at the banquet, the wheels of fate had already turned toward an unpredictable direction. The day we signed the prenuptial agreement, Su Qing took me to the Civil Affairs Bureau. No flowers, no rings, not even a smile. The whole process felt like a business contract signing, except the contract's duration was a lifetime. After the wedding, you'll move into my apartment, she said as she drove. You can put your things in the guest room. I stared out the window, throat tightening. Why me? The car stopped at a red light. Su Qing tapped her fingers lightly on the steering wheel, her nails rounded and neatly trimmed, painted with a low-key nude color. "You saved me," she paused. "And you're clean." "Clean?" I asked. "No complicated social connections, no bad habits, no skeletons in the closet." Her tone was like she was appraising a commodity. "Most importantly, you're not like others, scheming to get something from me." I smiled wryly. So, in her eyes, I was just a safe option. The first night, I moved into her apartment. I tossed and turned on the bed in the guest room. The luxurious, spacious apartment on the top floor of a downtown building was suffocatingly cold, every corner radiating a detached elegance, much like its owner. At 5 in the morning, I was woken by noises coming from the kitchen. Su Qing was already dressed and brewing coffee. Seeing me, she nodded slightly. "Good morning. Do you know how to use the coffee machine?" "Yes," I said, walking over, accidentally brushing her elbow. She immediately stepped aside. This deliberate distance would define every day of our marriage. She gave me a secondary bank card, but I never used it. She had a driver pick me up for work, but I insisted on taking the subway. I made dinner for her on her birthday, but she worked late at the office. 3 months into our marriage, Jinhua Group faced a hostile takeover. Su Qing didn't come home for an entire week. I went to the company with a change of clothes and stomach medicine to find her. When I pushed open the office door, she was slumped over the desk, napping. The computer screen was still on, and next to her was a half-drunk cup of cold coffee. I gently draped a coat over her, but she suddenly woke up, instinctively grabbing my wrist. "It's me," I whispered. She loosened her grip and rubbed her temples. "What are you doing here?" "Just checking if you're dead yet," I said half-jokingly, setting the thermos box on the desk. "Eat something." She stared at the hot food I took out, her expression softening for a moment. "Thank you," she said quietly, picking up the chopsticks. That night, I stayed at the office with her. At 3 in the morning, she finally couldn't hold on any longer and fell asleep on my shoulder. I could smell the faint scent of her perfume, mixed with her exhaustion. In that moment, I suddenly realized that this strong woman had a vulnerable side. But the next morning, she was back to her usual cold, indifferent self, as if the reliance from the night before had been just a figment of my imagination. Time passed like sand through an hourglass. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Our marriage had become a strange, symbiotic relationship. To the outside world, we were a loving couple. At home, we were like two strangers living together. In the 5th year, Su Jin's father had a stroke and was hospitalized. I stayed at the hospital for 2 full weeks, driving Su Jin back and forth and taking care of her father. One late night, she came out of the ward and saw me, still waiting on the bench in the hallway, eyes red. "Go get some rest," she said. I stood up and handed her a cup of hot milk. "You need rest more." She took the cup, her fingertips cold. We sat silently side by side, the scent of hospital disinfectant mingling with the faint trace of her perfume. "Dad has always hoped I would marry someone from a family of equal standing," she suddenly said. "He still doesn't understand why I chose you." My heart tightened sharply. "Yeah, why?" She turned to look at me. Something fleeting flashed in her eyes, but in the end, she just shook her head. "Go to sleep. There's a board meeting tomorrow." That was the closest we ever got to truly opening up to each other, like a match struck in the darkness, burning bright for a moment, only to fade instantly. In the spring of the 7th year, Su Jin secured the largest overseas project for the group. At the celebration banquet, she drank more than usual, and as I helped her back home, she leaned against me, her breath laced with the sweet aroma of red wine. "Chen Mo." She slurred my name. My heart raced. "Tomorrow, remind me to check the quarterly report." I smiled bitterly as I helped her onto the bed. Even when she was drunk beyond recognition, her mind was still focused on work. As I tucked her in, my hand accidentally brushed against her cheek. Unconsciously, she nuzzled my palm like a spoiled cat. The closeness in that moment made my chest ache. Only at times like these could I briefly have her all to myself. The next morning, she had returned to her usual self, wearing a neat suit and reviewing reports at the table, as though the vulnerability of the night before had never existed. "Good morning," she said without looking up. "The coffee is in the pot." I poured myself a cup and sat across from her. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a golden hue around her. 7 years, and she was still so beautiful, beautiful enough to break my heart. "Su Jin," I mustered the courage to speak. Her phone suddenly rang. After taking the call, she quickly stood up. The client from Singapore arrived early. "I have to go to the office." As she reached the door, she turned back and glanced at me. "What were you about to say?" I shook my head. "Nothing. Hope work goes well." The sound of the door closing echoed painfully in the empty apartment. I stared at the cup of coffee she hadn't finished, suddenly realizing that our marriage was like this cold cup of coffee, calm on the surface, but long cooled on the inside. I first met Su Jin's family 3 months after we got married, when her father, Su Hongru, celebrated his 60th birthday with a banquet at the Su family's old residence. That morning, Su Jin tossed me a delicate gift box. "Put this on," she said briefly. 6 o'clock tonight, don't be late. Inside the box was an expensive custom suit, the fabric smooth like water. As I stood in front of the mirror tying my tie, Su Jin walked over, furrowing her brow as she adjusted it. "The bow tie is too loose." Her fingers brushed over my Adam's apple, sending a subtle shiver through me. "Remember, no matter what you hear tonight, keep smiling." The Su family residence was located on a mountain on the outskirts of the city, a 3-story villa combining Chinese and Western architectural styles. As we entered, the butler's scrutinizing gaze made me feel uncomfortable. The hall was filled with the fragrance of fine clothes and the presence of politicians and business elites. Su Jin clung to my arm, her smile perfect, but her body stiff as a board. "Jeaner, is this your husband?" A well-dressed woman approached, her gaze sweeping over me like an X-ray. "Aunt," Su Jin nodded. "This is Chun Mo." "Oh, the little clerk." The woman's red lips curled into a mocking smile. "I heard your parents are teachers." I tightened my grip on my glass. "Yes, they teach at a high school in the county." "How humble." She elongated the words, turning to Su Jin. "Your father nearly had a stroke, you know." Su Jin's expression didn't change. "Aunt, excuse us. We need to go wish Dad a happy birthday." After leaving the crowd, she whispered, "Don't mind it." "I don't mind." I tug at my tie. "I should have worn my own clothes." She glanced at me. That suit was a giveaway from a charity auction. The tags are still on it. I froze, not expecting her to notice such details. Su Hongru sat at the head of the table, his silver-gray hair meticulously combed, his gaze sharp as an eagle's. Even sitting down, his tall frame was apparent, and Su Jin's eyes and brows resembled his. "Dad." Su Jin stepped forward, "wishing you happiness as vast as the East Sea and longevity as enduring as the South Mountain." The old man grunted, his eyes landing on me. "This is the person you chose?" I took a step forward, respectfully presenting my gift. "Uncle, happy birthday. This is a small token from Su Jin and me." "Uncle," the old man sneered. "You're married, and you still call me uncle?" A few quiet laughs echoed around us. My ears burned. "Dad, happy birthday." He didn't take the gift, but instead turned to Su Jin. "The Wang family's son just returned from Wall Street yesterday. You should meet him." Su Jin remained expressionless. "I'm already married. Is that really called marriage?" The old man raised his voice. "You didn't even have a wedding. How do we know if you're truly married?" Sweat broke out in my palms. Indeed, our marriage felt more like a transaction. No wedding, nothing. "Dad," Su Jin's voice was as cold as ice. "If you don't welcome us, we can leave now." The old man slammed the table. "Nonsense." The banquet hall fell silent, all eyes on us, like prisoners under the spotlight. "Uncle Su, please don't be angry." A young man in a dark blue suit approached. Jin was just confused for a moment. His affectionate tone made my stomach twist. This must be the Wang family's son, a Harvard graduate from a real estate family, a perfect match for the Su family. "Mr. Chun, right?" He turned to me and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you. I hear you're an assistant at the Jin Hua Group?" I shook his hand. "Yes, I handle the marketing department." "Ah, the marketing department." He smiled knowingly. "That must be fulfilling." A few chuckles echoed around us. To these people, my position was probably worth less than an ant. At dinner, I was seated at the far end of the long table, next to Su Jin's cousin, Su Rue, a carefree, rich second generation. He constantly poured me wine, subtly probing into the history of my relationship with Su Jin. Honestly, he leaned over, his breath smelling of alcohol. "How did you manage to win my sister over?" She was famously known as an ice queen. I clenched the dinner knife. "We're very much in love." "In love?" he guffawed. "Come off it. Who doesn't know what this marriage is all about? My sister just grabbed some random nobody to marry, purely to spite the old master." His words stabbed into my heart like daggers. Indeed, the true nature of this marriage was crystal clear, even to outsiders. After the banquet, Su Jin was summoned to the study by the old master. I stood in the garden for some air, but the night breeze couldn't dispel the suffocating ache in my chest. "What's wrong?" "Can't take it anymore." My aunt's voice came from behind. "Divorce sooner rather than later. It'd be better for both of you." I turned to see her leaning against a veranda pillar, smoking. Thank you for your concern, but we're doing just fine. Stop pretending, she said, exhaling a smoke ring. Gina has always been headstrong. She'd do anything to defy the old master. You're merely a tool for her rebellion. I silently gazed at the distant mountain silhouettes. My aunt's words were like a mirror, reflecting the truth I had always refused to face. Su Qing looked pale when she came out. Neither of us spoke on the drive back. It wasn't until we entered the city that she finally broke the silence. About tonight. I'm sorry. It's fine, I said, watching the flowing lights outside the window. Your family is right. I'm indeed not good enough for you. She slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching harshly. Listen, she turned to me, her eyes glinting in the darkness. I chose you for my own reasons. What others say doesn't matter. What matters is what you think. I stared at her in astonishment. This was the first time in 7 years she had expressed her stance so unequivocally. The words died on my lips. I wanted to say I loved her ever since that night at the cocktail party. Wanted to say that even though this marriage began absurdly, I had long since taken it seriously. Wanted to say I didn't care what others thought, as long as she needed me. I would always be by her side. But in the end, I merely said, I understand. Disappointment flickered in her eyes as she turned away and restarted the car. At that moment, I suddenly realized perhaps we were both waiting for the other to take the first step, yet both held back by pride and fear. Back home, she headed straight for the master bedroom, the sound of the door closing like a sigh. I stood in the living room, staring at our wedding photo on the wall. A supplementary shot taken after we registered, both of us standing stiffly with enough space between us to fit another person. For 7 years, that photo had hung there like a meticulously staged performance. And tonight, I finally saw my place in this marriage, a prop to make up numbers, a convenient shield. Tragically, even knowing all this, I still couldn't stop loving her. It was a rainy night. I remember it clearly. The company's quarterly audit had just ended, and I had worked overtime for 3 consecutive days, my eyes sore as if sand had been thrown into them. At 11 o'clock at night, I dragged my exhausted body back to the apartment building. Raindrops hit my face, chilling me to the bone. Just then, a familiar black Mercedes slowly approached. It was Su Jin's official car, usually driven by Old Zhang, the chauffeur. But tonight, Lin Xuan, her special assistant, was in the driver's seat. I instinctively ducked behind a pillar, though I didn't know why. Rainwater trickled down my neck and into my collar, yet I felt no cold. All my blood rushed to my temples, throbbing violently. After the car stopped, Lin Xuan quickly hurried around to the passenger side, opened an umbrella, and then carefully helped Su Qing out. She was unsteady, leaning limply against him. Lin Xuan held the umbrella with one hand and wrapped the other around her waist. The two of them pressed incredibly close. Mind the steps, I heard Lin Xuan's gentle voice. Su Qing mumbled a reply, her head resting on his shoulder. Under the streetlight, I saw an unnatural flush on her cheeks. She was clearly drunk. The tenderness in Lin Xuan's eyes as he looked down at her caused a wrenching pain in my stomach. They walked towards the apartment entrance like that, clinging to each other like an intimate couple. The rain blurred my vision, but that image was seared into my mind, his hand on her waist, her hair brushing against his cheek. I stood in the rain, feeling something shatter within my chest. In 7 years of marriage, Su Qing had never shown such vulnerability or dependence in front of me. She was always as perfect as a statue, maintaining her composure even when drunk. My phone suddenly vibrated. It was a message from Su Qing. Have a social engagement tonight. Won't be home for dinner. I stared at the message, received an hour ago, the corners of my mouth twisting into a bitter arc. So, social engagement meant a private rendezvous with her assistant, and won't be home for dinner meant needing someone to escort her home in an embrace. The elevator numbers ascended one by one. I stood at the corner of the hallway, watching Lin Xuan support Su Qing as they stopped in front of our apartment door. He fished the keys out of her bag, his movements so practiced it was as if he'd done it countless times. The door opened, he guided her inside, and the sound of the door closing was exceptionally jarring in the empty hallway. I stood outside the door for 10 minutes, perhaps longer. Rainwater dripped from my hair, seeping into dark patches on the carpet. Countless images flashed through my mind. The exchanged glances between Su Qing and Lin Xuan in the meeting room. The brush of his fingertips when he handed her coffee, the office gossip about them. The door suddenly opened, and Lin Xuan walked out, adjusting his shirt collar. He was visibly startled when he saw me. Then a triumphant smile spread across his face. Team Leader Chun, So late? He said, glancing pointedly at my drenched clothes. President Su had too much to drink. I just brought her back. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Thank you for taking care of my wife. My pleasure, he shrugged. After all, for these 7 years, I've been the one taking care of her. In all respects. Blood rushed to my head. I nearly threw a punch at that smug face. But in the end, I merely stepped aside to let him pass. Confronting someone like him would only lower my own dignity. Closing the door, the apartment was pitch black. A sliver of light shone from under the master bedroom door, and I could faintly hear the sound of running water. Su Qing was taking a shower, using the body wash I had personally chosen, sleeping in the bed whose sheets I changed weekly. I sat on the living room sofa, soaked to the bone, yet with no desire to change. On the coffee table lay half a glass of water and 2 hangover pills. Beside them, Lin Wan handkerchief, expensive silk, embroidered with his initials in the corner. The bathroom door opened, and Su Qing walked out, wearing a robe, her hair still dripping wet. When she saw me, she visibly froze. Yo, what are you doing here? Her voice was hoarse from intoxication. This is my home, I said calmly, my voice so unfamiliar, even I didn't recognize it. She rubbed her temples. I mean, why are you soaked? Forgot my umbrella. I rose and walked towards the study. You should rest. I still have some work to do. She looked as if she wanted to say something, but hesitated, ultimately just nodding and turning back to the master bedroom. The sound of the door closing was like a knife, severing the last connection between us. In the study, I opened my computer and pulled up the divorce agreement I had prepared long ago. This document had been on my hard drive for 2 years. Every time Su Qing and I argued, I would open it, look it over, and then close it. But tonight, I pressed the print button. As the printer hummed, I scrolled through my phone's photo album. It held a few of our photos together, standing politely side by side at the company's annual gala, a shot of her back as she walked ahead of me on a trip, and that counterfeit wedding photo. 7 years of marriage, and not a single genuinely intimate photo together. The agreement printed out. I signed my name, my handwriting incredibly steady. Perhaps because this decision had been brewing in my heart for so long, carrying it out felt as calm as still water. At 3 a.m, I lay on the study sofa, clutching a blanket, listening to the faint snores coming from the master bedroom. The rain outside had stopped. Moonlight filtered through the blinds, painting striped scars on the floor. I stared at those shadows, remembering that rainy night 7 years ago, the black umbrella she handed me, and her words, "See you on Monday, Chinamo." How could I have imagined then that this marriage would end this way? Not because of differences in social status, not because of family opposition, not even because of her indifference, but for the most cliched reason of all betrayal. When daylight came, I would place the agreement on the dining table, then pack my bags and leave. 7 years of affection, ultimately severable with just a few sheets of paper. How ludicrous, and yet how fair. Chapter 7. I divorced her and also resigned from her company. Because we had a prenuptial agreement, we each kept our respective assets, so the divorce proceeded smoothly. The morning sunlight stung my eyes. I awoke on the study sofa, still wearing the shirt that had been soaked last night, and then dried by my body heat, clinging wrinkled to my skin, reeking of a mixture of rain and sweat. On the dining table, the divorce agreement was already laid out, next to a steaming cup of black coffee, Su Qing's daily morning ritual. She sat opposite me, dressed in a sharply tailored gray suit, her makeup impeccable, showing no trace of last night's intoxication. What's this? She nudged the agreement with a fingertip, her voice as cold as ice. As you can see, a divorce agreement. I pulled out a chair and sat down. According to the prenuptial agreement, we each retain our premarital assets, and marital property will be divided 50-50. I've already signed it. She stared at the agreement, her face growing paler. Because of last night? Not entirely. I picked up my coffee and took a sip, the bitterness spreading on my tongue. This marriage was a mistake from the very beginning. We both knew it. Lin Wan just drove me home, she said suddenly. There's nothing between us. I laughed. No need to explain. It's been 7 years, Su Qing. Have we ever had anything between us? She froze, as if she'd been slapped. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating her. I could clearly see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes and the slight tremble of her lips. This woman, always so invulnerable, finally showed a crack. I thought. Her voice was so low it was almost inaudible. I thought we were doing all right. All right. I repeated her words, a stone pressing on my chest. Yes, treating each other with distant respect, not interfering in each other's lives. That's certainly all right. She shot to her feet, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. What do you really want? I want a real wife, not an eternally distant Su. I stood up too. I want someone to ask me how my day was when I come home, not just cold notes and text messages forever. I want you to love me. The words caught in my throat, ultimately unsaid. Su Qing stood there like a perfect statue, only the slight tremor in her fingers betraying her emotions. We faced each other across the dining table. 7 years of marriage weighed in the balance at this moment, as light as a feather. Fine. She finally spoke, her voice regaining its usual calm composure. I'll sign. She picked up a pen and signed her name on the agreement, her movements crisp and efficient, as if signing an ordinary contract. I watched her write, Su Qing stroke by stroke, suddenly remembering her expression 7 years ago at the Civil Affairs Bureau when she signed the marriage registration form. So calm, it was almost cold. I'll move out today, I said. No need. She closed the folder. I'll go stay at my parents' for a while. This house. You can continue living here. That won't be necessary. I shook my head. I've already found a place. She opened her mouth, as if wanting to say something, but finally just nodded. As you wish. An hour later, I had packed my luggage. Truth be told, there wasn't much to pack. Most things were bought after marriage and, according to the agreement, should be split 50-50, but I didn't want to take anything. I only packed one suitcase with a few clothes, my laptop, and that black umbrella engraved with a SW. Su Qing stood at the doorway, her back to me, the line of her shoulders stiff. About the company. I'll submit my resignation letter. I zipped in my suitcase. I won't be going to work today. I'll hand over my work to Shaoli. That's not what I meant. She turned around, her eyes frighteningly red. You can stay at Jinhua and watch you and Lin Wan together every day. I gave a bitter smile. No, thank you. Her lips trembled. Chinemo, do you really think I would? It doesn't matter anymore. I cut her off, pulling on my suitcase. I wish you happiness. As I walked out the apartment door, the sunlight was so blinding I couldn't open my eyes. 7 years ago, I entered this marriage empty-handed. Now, as I leave, I am still empty-handed, except for a heart full of scars. The divorce proceedings went surprisingly smoothly. The prenuptial agreement protected both our interests. There were no arguments, no acrimony, as clean and efficient as concluding a business partnership. On the day we received the divorce certificate, Su Qing didn't come. She sent her lawyer in her stead. Ms. Su asked me to convey to you, the lawyer said, pushing up his glasses, should you need anything, you can contact her at any time. I smiled faintly but said nothing. As I walked out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, a light drizzle was falling. I didn't open my umbrella, letting the raindrops fall on my face, mingling with my warm tears. The resignation process was equally simple. The HR manager looked at me with eyes full of sympathy. News of my divorce from Su Qing had already spread throughout the company. As I was clearing my desk, Lin Wan leaned against the doorframe, a look of feigned regret on his face. Such a pity, Team Leader Chun, he said deliberately loudly. We won't be seeing you around anymore. My colleagues cast curious glances my way. I calmly stuffed the last few books into a cardboard box. Take good care, Miss Su. He froze for a moment, clearly not expecting such a response. Cradling the box, I walked towards the elevator, feeling his chilling gaze on my back. The moment the elevator doors closed, I let out a long sigh of relief. 7 years. I was finally free from this absurd marriage, and free from the self that had always lived in Su Qing's shadow. My new rented apartment was in the eastern part of the city, much smaller than Su Qing's mansion, but it was filled with sunlight. I lay on the floor of the empty living room, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, and for the first time, I felt I could breathe freely. My phone vibrated. It was a text message from Su Qing. Have you settled in? I stared at the message for a long time, but ultimately didn't reply. Divorce is like an amputation. Pain is inevitable, but only by severing completely can the wound possibly heal. As night fell, I turned on my computer and started sending out resumes. 30 years old. It wasn't too late to start over. This time, I would live for myself, no longer someone's husband, someone's appendage. Outside the window, the city lights came on one by one. One of those lights belonged to Su Qing, but from now on, it had nothing to do with me. 3 weeks after the divorce, Su Qing called me at 2 a.m. The ringing shattered the silence of the night. I stared at the flashing name on the screen, my heart pounding like thunder. Hello. I finally answered. Heavy breathing came from the other end, followed by the faint clinking of glass. She was drinking. Chen Mo. Her voice was slurred, laced with a vulnerability I had never heard before. My stomach. It hurts so much. I immediately sat bolt upright. Have you taken your medicine? There's stomach medication on the second shelf of the medicine cabinet. I can't find it. She gasped softly. You always prepared it before. Those words pierced my heart like a knife. Indeed, for 7 years, I had remembered her menstrual cycle, kept her favorite coffee beans stocked, reminded her to eat on time, and silently placed a glass of warm milk beside her when she worked late into the night. These small habits had long been woven into the fabric of our lives, their existence only noticed after they were gone. What about Lin Wan? I forced myself to remain calm. Have him help you find it. Silence on the other end for a few seconds. He's not my assistant anymore. What? I fired him. Her voice grew fainter. That night, he did try, but I pushed him away. My fingers clenched the phone tightly, knuckles turning white. What was this? A belated explanation? A ridiculous confession? Su Qing, I took a deep breath. What you need now is stomach medicine, not your ex-husband. I'm sorry. Her voice suddenly took on a tearful tone. I'm sorry, Cheng Yu. I messed everything up. I was stunned. In 7 years, this was the first time I had heard Su Qing apologize. Su Qing, who was always proud, always right, was now sobbing like a little girl on the other end of the line. Don't hang up, she pleaded. Just talk to me for a while, okay? Like we used to. I closed my eyes and heard myself say, first, go to the kitchen. There's spare medicine in the small cabinet next to the electric kettle. Rustling sounds came from the other end. She seemed to be moving according to my instructions. I could almost see her, barefoot on the marble floor, silk nightgown hanging loosely on her shoulders, her dark hair disheveled around her pale face. This was the Su Qing only I'd seen, Su Qing with all her defenses down. Found it, she said weakly, followed by the sound of swallowing pills. Now go lie down on the sofa. I use a commanding tone without realizing it. There's a blanket under the coffee table. How do you remember everything? She murmured, her voice carrying a softness I found irresistible. Because I love you. The words swirled on the tip of my tongue, but I swallowed them back. What was the point of saying it now? Get some rest. I finally replied just like that. Cheng Yu. She suddenly called out to me urgently. I want to see you. My heart skipped a beat. Why? The keypad lock on my apartment is broken. I can't find the warranty card. She came up with a flimsy excuse. I almost laughed out loud. The president of Jinhua Group couldn't find a locksmith's number? Su Qing, I sighed, don't be like this. There was a long silence on the other end, so long I thought she had fallen asleep. Just as I was about to hang up, she suddenly said softly, I got used to someone making me coffee every morning. Used to a light being left on in the living room when I came home late at night. Used to. Her voice trailed off. Used to having you in my life. My eyes suddenly grew warm. 7 years. This was the closest she had ever come to a confession. Sleep, I said, my voice hoarse. The pain will subside once the medicine kicks in. Will you hang up? She asked cautiously, like a child afraid of being abandoned. No. I lay back down on the bed, placing the phone beside my pillow. I'm right here. Her even breathing came from the other end, occasionally interspersed with a few uncomfortable soft moans. I listened like that until she, too, fell into a deep sleep. As the sky outside gradually lightened, I gently hung up the phone, my chest filled with an unfamiliar, tender ache. The next day at noon, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Su Qing standing outside, dressed in a simple white shirt and jeans, without makeup, dark circles prominent beneath her eyes. She clutched 2 takeout bags, anxiously biting her lower lip. I opened the door, and her familiar perfume, mingled with the scent of sunshine, wafted over me. I was just passing by. She awkwardly held up the takeout bags. I bought your favorite Cantonese dim sum. Too much of it. I looked at her, at the transparent excuse of passing by after clearly traversing half the city, and my heart felt as if an invisible hand had gripped it. Come in. I stepped aside. She entered cautiously, her gaze sweeping over my modest apartment, visibly faltering when she saw our photo by the bedside, the only one I had taken from the office. Does your stomach still hurt? I asked. She shook her head, opening the takeout containers one by one, her movements so clumsy, unlike the formidable businesswoman renowned for her decisiveness in the corporate world. I asked Lawyer Zhang. The divorce agreement can still be rescinded. I paused, chopsticks in hand, and looked up at her. Sunlight slanted through the window, illuminating her slightly trembling eyelashes. Why? I asked softly. Her fingers twisted together. Because I realized. Realized what? That she was used to being taken care of? That life was inconvenient? Or that I realized I love you, she finally said, her voice as light as a feather, yet it stirred a hurricane in my heart. I was stunned. The 3 words I had waited 7 years to hear, just like that, on an ordinary noon, drifted over from beside a takeout box. It's too late, Su Qing, I heard myself say. The color instantly drained from her face, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. I know I have no right to say this, but please give me a chance, all right? Just one. I looked at her reddened eyes, suddenly remembering that rainy night 7 years ago, the warmth of her fingertips when she handed me an umbrella. Fate, like a mischievous child, always makes us understand our hearts at the most inopportune times. The dim sum is getting cold, was all I finally said. The light in her eyes dimmed, but she still managed a faint smile. Let's eat first. We ate the already cold shrimp dumplings in silence, neither of us broaching the subject again. But I knew some things, once spoken, could never be taken back. Just like a 7-year marriage, once ended, it was difficult to return to the beginning. As she was leaving, she hesitated at the door for a long time, finally just saying softly, "I'll wait for you, no matter how long." Closing the door, I leaned against the wall and slowly slid to the floor. My phone vibrated. It was a message from her. "The keypad lock isn't broken. I just wanted to see you." I stared at the message, a pang of mingled sourness and fullness tightening my chest. So, even someone as proud as Su Qing would bow her head for love. I just didn't know if such an awakening was timely enough to salvage our already shattered marriage. Su Qing began to appear frequently in my life, like a gentle invasion. Every morning, my phone would ring punctually at 7, a good morning text from her. The front desk at the office would always have lunch delivered by someone she sent, all my favorite dishes. When I worked late in the night, she would happen to pass by my office building and ask if I needed a ride. This method of pursuit was endearingly clumsy, completely unlike the Su Qing who was so ruthlessly decisive in the business world. My colleagues started teasing me. "Director Chun, is the president of Jinhua pursuing you?" I would just smile, non-committally. A month later, on a weekend, the doorbell rang again. This time, Su Qing held a stack of documents, her eyes shining with astonishing brightness. "I've redrafted the agreement." She walked straight in and spread the documents on the coffee table. "The prenuptial agreement is voided. All postnuptial assets are to be jointly owned, including shares in Jinhua." I glanced at the densely packed clauses, my heart constricting violently. This meant if we divorced again, she would lose half her fortune, a concession the president of a publicly listed group would never easily make. "Why?" I closed the folder. She stood by the window, the sunlight casting a golden halo around her. "Because I want to start over with you. Without calculations, without reservations." "Su Qing," I took a deep breath. "We tried. It didn't work." "That's because I was too stupid." She suddenly raised her voice. 7 years. I was like a blind person, unable to see your goodness. You remembered my every habit, tolerated all my bad tempers, and I never even told you I love you. Her voice choked. This was the second time I'd seen her cry. The first was on the day of our divorce. She had her back to me, her shoulders shaking like a leaf in the wind. "Not all mistakes can be rectified," I said softly. "Give me 3 months." She grasped my hand, her palm icy cold. "If, after 3 months, you still don't want to remarry, I will never bother you again." I looked at her crimson-rimmed eyes, remembering that late-night call about her stomach ache, remembering her standing at my door, awkwardly holding takeout. In 7 years of marriage, she had never been so humble. Why 3 months? Because. She bit her lip. The doctor said the first 3 months of pregnancy are the most unstable. My mind went blank. What? She gently placed her hand on her lower abdomen. 4 weeks. It must have been the night before the divorce. I stumbled back a step, knocking over the water glass on the coffee table. Water bloomed across the documents, blurring the carefully drafted clauses. Countless images flashed through my mind. Her unusual passion the night before the divorce, the traces on the bedsheets in the morning, her sudden pursuit over the past month. "Is it for the child?" My voice was hoarse, almost unrecognizable as my own. "No," she shook her head vehemently. "It was only after I found out I was pregnant that I understood. I want this family. I want you." Family. The words sounded so foreign yet familiar coming from her lips. For 7 years, our shared apartment had never been called home by her, always just the house or the apartment. "Su Qing," I began with difficulty. "A marriage shouldn't be maintained reluctantly for a child." "It's not reluctant," she almost shouted. "Chinamo, look at me." She forced me to look her in the eyes, those eyes that were always calm and self-possessed, now filled with vulnerability and entreaty. I love you. Not because of the child, not because of habit, but because you are you. Sunlight danced on her face, and I clearly saw the fine lines at the corners of her eyes and the trembling of her lips. This woman, once so imperious, now laid bare all her vulnerabilities to me without reservation. 3 months, I heard myself say. Just 3 months. She threw herself into my arms, her tears soaking my shirt. I smelled the familiar scent of her shampoo in her hair and suddenly remembered that cocktail party 7 years ago. She had leaned against my chest just like this then, only then it was out of fear and now it was out of love. That night, I moved back into the apartment. Nothing had changed, except for a photo of us together on the nightstand in the master bedroom, a space that had always been empty before. Su Qing, like an excited little girl, pulled me along to show me the nursery she had redecorated, though it was still very early for that. Do you like blue or pink? She asked. Either is fine, I said, stroking her hair. As long as it's our child. She suddenly grew quiet, leaning against my shoulder. I'm sorry for making you wait so long. I didn't answer, just held her gently. 3 months. 90 days. Enough time for me to see if this marriage could still be saved. This time, there would be no prenuptial agreement, no calculations, only 2 battered but still beating hearts, and an unexpectedly conceived new life. Late at night, I sensed her quietly getting out of bed. Through the slightly ajar door, I saw her in the study, flipping through our wedding album, the album she had never paid any mind to before. In the moonlight, her fingers gently caressed my face in the photos, her touch as tender as if she were handling a treasure. At that moment, I suddenly understood. Perhaps love had been there all along. We had just been too clumsy, too proud, taking 7 years to learn how to express it. 2 weeks of the 3-month period had passed, and Su Jin's pursuit of me only intensified. Every morning, a fresh bouquet of white roses would appear on my desk. At lunchtime, she would punctually show up at the company cafeteria, sitting opposite me, oblivious to the stares of others. After work, her car was always parked at the building entrance, window rolled down, revealing her face feigning composure. So, Su, I finally said one day, unable to bear it any longer, you're making it very difficult for me to work. She was in my office, helping me organize files. God knows why the CEO of Jinhua Group would personally do such a thing. Hearing my words, her fingers paused, and when she looked up, a flicker of hurt crossed her eyes. I just wanted to help. I don't need help, I said, closing the folder. We need to talk. She sat opposite me like a child who had done something wrong, her fingers twisting together nervously. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting striped shadows on her face, and I noticed the distinct dark circles under her eyes. Listen, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I understand your guilt, but this way of compensating isn't healthy for either of us. It's not guilt, she interrupted me eagerly. Chinemo, I really... Suddenly, the office door was pushed open and Department Manager Wang Wei poked his head in. Director Chun, big news. Our company has been acquired. I frowned. When did this happen? Just now, Wang Wei said excitedly. I heard it was Jinhua Group. Huh? CEO Su, what are you doing here? I whipped my head around to look at Su Qing. A flicker of guilt crossed her face. You bought Karue? I asked in disbelief. She bit her lip. I just wanted to give you more room to grow. Good heavens. I stood up, my chest feeling as if it were crushed by a heavy stone. Do you know what this is called? This is called control. No, it's not. She stood up too. Just what? I sneered. Making decisions for me again? Just like that sudden marriage proposal 7 years ago. The color drained from her face instantly. Outside the office, curious gazes from colleagues pierced through the glass wall towards us. Let's talk outside. I grabbed my jacket and dragged her out of the company. In the underground parking lot, I released her wrist. A red mark had already formed around it. Su Qing didn't cry out in pain, just looked at me with those tear-filled eyes like a wounded fawn. What exactly do you want? I questioned in a low voice. I want to make amends, she said softly. With money? With power? I shook my head. Su Qing, you don't understand where the problem lies at all. Then tell me. She suddenly raised her voice. Tell me what to do. I've never pursued someone like this before. Her voice choked, and in the dim light of the parking lot, I saw tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. It was only then that I suddenly realized the lofty Su Qing, perhaps she truly didn't know how to love someone properly. What I want isn't flowers, not a promotion or a raise, I said wearily. What I want is respect. Trust is what? Loyalty. The word was stuck in my throat, but I couldn't say it. The image of that rainy night resurfaced in my mind. Lin Wan with his arm around her waist, her leaning against his shoulder. Forget it. I turned to leave. We both need to calm down. Because of Lin Wan? She suddenly asked. You still don't believe me? I stopped without turning back. I believed my eyes. He did try to take advantage of me that night, but I pushed him away. She rushed in front of me. I fired him. What more do you want me to do? I want you to go to him. I finally exploded. Since you two are so close, why bother clinging to me? The words cut through the air like a knife. Su Qing staggered back a step, as if physically struck by my words. The parking lot fell deathly silent. Only the distant sound of dripping water echoed. So that's how it is? She suddenly laughed, a smile more painful to look at than tears. 7 years of marriage, and this is the kind of person I am in your eyes. She turned and walked towards her car, her back ramrod straight, but I knew she was crying. Su Qing, who never showed weakness, was shattered by my words. Su Qing. I called out to her subconsciously. She didn't turn back, just waved her hand. Don't worry, I won't bother you anymore. With the roar of an engine, her car disappeared around the corner of the parking lot. I stood rooted to the spot, a sudden, unprecedented emptiness washing over me. I had won the argument, yet it felt as though I had lost something vital. Back in the office, Human Resources had already sent out a company-wide email announcing Kurui's acquisition by Jinhua. My promotion notice followed swiftly, Vice President of Marketing reporting directly to the President's office. Congratulations, Mr. Chun. With President Su as your backer, your future is limitless. I forced a smile, but my heart felt heavy as a stone. My phone screen lit up. It was a text from Su Qing. My resignation has been processed, effective tomorrow. Severance will be paid at the highest rate. I stared at the message for a long time, ultimately not replying. When I left work, a cardboard box sat on my desk. Inside were all the gifts I had given her during our 7 years of marriage. A necklace I had saved 3 months' salary to buy for her birthday. An out-of-print book she had once mentioned wanting, and a photo of us taken at an amusement park on our first date. Beneath it all lay a letter, her neat handwriting on the envelope. For Chun Mo's, eyes only. I didn't have the courage to open it. After carrying the box home, I sat in the dark living room, gazing at the city lights outside the window. Behind one of those lit windows, was Su Qing also sitting alone like this? Was she too regretting the words spoken? The phone suddenly rang. It was an unfamiliar number. When I answered, a man's voice said, Is this Mr. Chinemo? This is Lin Wan. I gripped the phone tightly. What is it? I think you should know the truth. His voice carried a hint of mockery. President Su was indeed drunk that night, but you'll definitely want to know what she said when she pushed me away. Speak. Don't touch me. I'm married. Lin Wan sneered. How ridiculous. Who in the entire business circle doesn't know your marriage is a sham? Yet she stubbornly held that line. Even though you clearly don't care. He was still saying something on the other end, but I could no longer hear him. All I could hear was Su Qing's voice saying, 7 years of marriage, and this is the kind of person you think I am? And the image of her trembling shoulders as she turned away. I grabbed my keys and rushed out, but I didn't know where to find her. Her apartment? The company? Or had she decided to walk out of my life completely? The night wind slapped my face. I suddenly understood. I had been using that rainy night as an excuse. What I truly feared wasn't betrayal, but giving my heart again to someone who might hurt me. And now, I might have lost her forever. 3 days later, Su Qing's assistant, Xiao Li, called, saying President Su had a persistent high fever but refused to go to the hospital. When I rushed to her apartment, the passcode lock had been changed back to its original combination, our wedding date. As the door opened, the strong smell of alcohol and medicine assaulted my nostrils. Empty wine bottles and documents were scattered around the living room. Su Qing was curled up on the sofa, her cheeks flushed an unnatural red, wearing only one of my old shirts. You're here. Her voice was hoarse as she struggled to sit up. Don't worry. This isn't some elaborate ploy to win your sympathy. I really have a cold. I touched her forehead. It was frighteningly hot. On the coffee table were half a glass of water and a few fever reducers. She had clearly tried to manage on her own. Why didn't you take the medicine? I picked up the medicine box. I did. It didn't work. She coughed twice. Maybe it's the flu. Without a word, I picked her up. She was terrifyingly light, like a feather. To the hospital, I said curtly. She struggled a little. No need. I'll be fine after some sleep. Quiet. I tightened my arms. This time, you listen to me. She quieted down, burying her face in the crook of my neck, her scorching breath brushing against my skin. In that moment, I suddenly realized this was the first time in 7 years she had completely entrusted herself to me, without any defense or calculation. The hospital diagnosed her with pneumonia, requiring hospitalization for observation. Su Qing lay in the hospital bed on an 4-drip, looking like a fragile child. I sat by her bedside, watching her fever-chapped lips, my chest tightening with each pang. "You can go," she said suddenly. "You don't need to pity me. Don't talk." I poured a glass of water and handed it to her. She didn't take it, just stared at me. "I finally understand why you insisted on a divorce. To be doubted by the person you trust most." She gave a bitter smile. "It's a terrible feeling." My hand holding the cup tightened, and water splashed onto her hospital gown. She was right. I had used an unconfirmed suspicion to negate 7 years of marriage, just as her family had negated me back then. "I'm sorry," I said in a low voice. She shook her head. "I deserved it. How much security have I given you all these years?" Outside, the sky grew dim. The only sound in the hospital room was the dripping of the floor. Su Jin's hand reached out from under the covers and gently rested on the back of mine. It was still very warm. "Chen Mo," she said softly, "will you promise me one thing?" "What is it?" "Next week is my dad's birthday. Accompany me on a trip back home." She coughed twice. "Consider it a dignified end to our 7 years of marriage. I promise I won't bother you after that." I looked at her haggard face and nodded. Perhaps this was the right way to say goodbye, to end where we began. A week later, Su Qing was discharged from the hospital, but she still looked very wan. The night before the birthday banquet, she sent me a message asking if I needed to prepare anything, her tone as formal as if communicating with a business associate. I replied that I didn't, and the conversation ended there. On the day of the banquet, I put on the suit she had once bought for me and drove to pick her up. Downstairs from her apartment, Su Qing was already waiting by the entrance, dressed in a dark green long gown, her hair pinned up, revealing her slender neck. Seeing my car, she was visibly startled. "Did you buy a new car?" she asked after getting in. "Rented," I said, handing her a gift box. "A gift for your father. A Hutian jade chess set. You said he likes them." She took the box, her fingers trembling slightly. "You still remember." I said nothing and started the car. Throughout the journey, we were polite to each other like strangers, neither of us mentioning divorce or reconciliation. The Su family's old residence was brightly lit, brimming with guests. Seeing us arrive together, Su Hongru was clearly taken aback for a moment, then quickly regained his composure. "Dad, happy birthday." Su Qing stepped forward to hug her father and presented the gift. "Chen Mo specially picked this out for you." The old master accepted the gift, giving me a long, meaningful look. "It's rare for you two to come together." "Indeed," my aunt interjected, her voice laced with a sharp, insinuating edge. "To be so amicable even after a divorce. Truly remarkable." A sudden silence fell upon the surroundings. Su Jin's face turned deathly pale. I took a step forward, gently placing my arm around her waist. "Who said we were divorced?" Su Qing whipped her head around to look at me, her eyes wide. I offered her a slight smile. The lie rolled off my tongue with ease. Since this was the dignified farewell she desired, I was willing to play my part in this final act. In the banquet hall, the familiar clinking of glasses and the drone of insincere pleasantries filled the air. I noticed Su Qing was distracted, her gaze frequently drifting toward the particular corner. "Not feeling well?" I asked in a low voice. She shook her head, forcing a smile. "Just a bit overwhelmed by memories." Halfway through the dinner, a familiar figure entered the hall. Lin Wan, dressed in a dark blue suit. He walked straight towards Su Hongru and presented his gift. The old master clapped him enthusiastically on the shoulder, treating him with the affection one might reserve for a son. My body tensed instantly. Su Qing seemed to sense my change, gently squeezing my hand. "He wasn't invited by me." Chen Mo, she began, then faltered. "Actually." Just then, Lin Wan spotted us, a provocative smirk playing on his lips. He sauntered over, wine glass in hand, deliberately raising his voice. Well, if it isn't the ex-husband?" President Su is quite the sentimentalist, bringing her ex-husband to a family banquet even after the divorce. The surrounding chatter died down instantly. I felt Su Jin's hand grow cold in mine. "Lin Wan," she said, her voice frigid, "watch your words." "Did I say something wrong?" He shrugged. "Everyone in the business circle knows you two have already." "We are perfectly fine," I interrupted, pulling Su Qing a little closer. "No need for your concern." Lin Wan's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? Then why has President Su been drowning her sorrows in alcohol every night lately?" "Why?" "Enough." Su Qing cut him off sharply. Please leave. On what grounds? Lin Wan sneered. I was invited by Uncle Su. Unlike some people who are clearly out of the picture but still shamelessly hanging around. I didn't wait for him to finish. I threw a punch. Lin Wan stumbled backward, crashing into the champagne tower. The sound of shattering glass and shrieks filled the air. Chen Mo. Su Qing grabbed my arm. Lin Wan wiped a trickle of blood from the corner of his mouth, a savage grin spreading across his face as he straightened up. Hit a nerve, did I? Do you know what you saw that night? It was Su Qing rejecting me. She'd rather cling to a dead marriage than. Shut up. Su Qing suddenly lunged forward and slapped Lin Wan hard across the face. You're fired. Never show your face to me again. The entire hall was in an uproar. Su Hongru approached, his face ashen. Jeaner, mind the occasion. Dad, Su Jin's voice trembled. Do you know? This man, the one you treat like your own son, almost assaulted your daughter when she was drunk. The old master's expression froze. Lin Xiaoyuan's face paled drastically. Nonsense. It was clearly Su Qing who seduced me. Security, Su Hongru roared. Get this man out of here. Amidst the chaos, I pulled Su Qing out of the hall. In the garden, the moonlight, soft as water, illuminated her trembling shoulders. Why didn't you tell me the truth sooner? I asked. She looked up, tears glistening in the moonlight. Even if I had, would you have believed me? In your eyes, I was already a cold-blooded, heartless liar. I reached out and wiped away her tears, the touch warm and real. 7 years of marriage. We had been like two blind individuals, fumbling in the dark, hurting each other, yet never truly seeing into the other's heart. I'm sorry, I said softly. She shook her head and took a document from her purse, handing it to me. This is for you. A declaration to nullify the divorce agreement. Whether you sign it or not is up to you. I took the document and, without even looking at it, tore it in half. Su Jin's eyes widened. You, Ms. Su Qing. I knelt on one knee, taking her hand. Will you marry me again? This time, no prenuptial agreement, no calculations, just you and me. Her tears fell, large and heavy, onto our clasped hands. You don't hate me. I did, I admitted honestly. But I hated myself more for my foolishness, for almost losing you. She threw herself into my arms, crying like a child. In the distance, the faint strains of music from the banquet hall drifted over. But in this quiet corner, we had finally found our way home.